Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Duthier. For the next hour, I'm going to be taking you through all the news that's happening in the United States and around the world. And I'm getting that news from these monitors right behind me. These are feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from all of our stations and affiliates around the country. You will only find that analysis and that deep reporting right here, CBS News 24/7. So let's begin. New allegations are swirling that President Trump's pick for FBI Director Kash Patel lied under oath, and orchestrated a wave of firings at the Bureau before being officially confirmed. There's a word missing in that teleprompter. That's okay. We're going to keep going. We're also tracking two dangerous storm systems on both coasts this morning. We're going to tell you who needs to be on high alert and where the threatening conditions are moving next. And we're going to take you inside a notorious El Salvadorian prison where some of the most dangerous and violent killers are locked up. This as the United States considers incarcerating migrant deportees in that country. This is CBS News 24/7. Let's begin on Capitol Hill, where the Senate Judiciary Committee is holding a meeting on the nomination of Kash Patel to be the next director of the FBI. But his nomination has hit some speed bumps, including allegations that Patel may have committed perjury during his confirmation process and overstepped his actual authority. So I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns to talk a little bit more about this. So Caitlin, Democratic Senator Dick Durbin is accusing Patel of conducting a wave of firings at the FBI without having been confirmed yet. But of course, we led with the fact that he may have perjured himself on the stand. Break that down for me.
Hey, Vlad, good to see you. Yeah, and as you saw, they're having that vote right now in committee to move him forward, which is likely to actually happen. But this is all stemming from a letter that Dick Durbin, who is a senior member on that committee, put forward a couple of days ago, which is alleging that Kash Patel had essentially directed firings at the FBI already before obviously taking this position. This is referring to some reporting that he says that he has that shows that acting director Bove was issuing these directives or talking about these directives from Stephen Miller, a chief White House person as well. So this is a lot of complications here, but Durbin is alleging that Patel may have perjured himself by saying that he has not done any of this. But again, this is the bigger part of this is, and I should say the FBI hasn't commented, DOJ hasn't commented, and the top Republican on the committee, Chuck Grassley, has said that this is all an attempt by Democrats to slow this process. Remember, he was supposed to be confirmed out of this committee last week, and Democrats stalled that process, pushed it forward a week. So Democrats have very little at their disposal to try and stop these nominations outright, and this is one way for them to do that. Is this going to have any impact on whether he gets through? No, not really. We don't know of any Republican yet who has said that they are going to vote against him. He's likely to get voted out of this committee momentarily, and he will likely get voted out of the full Senate as soon as they file for that vote.
All right, we'll be watching for that, Caitlin. What else are we expecting on the Hill this morning?
Well, RFK Jr. is going to have his confirmation vote in the full Senate this morning in just around 10:30, so later this hour, and he is likely to get confirmed. The big picture here, Vlad, is that we started out this process with Donald Trump naming several controversial picks. There were big questions about whether these picks could get through a Senate that has a narrow Republican majority. And what we're learning is that they are. We saw Tulsi Gabbard confirmed yesterday with just one Republican no vote, Mitch McConnell. We are expecting RFK Jr. to get through. We've already seen some of the more moderate Republicans like Lisa Murkowski and others. So what's significant here is that the Republican leadership on Capitol Hill feels very comfortable with the pace at which they are making these confirmations, and they are, looking for the president to have his full cabinet soon.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, a lot of activity on the Hill. Thank you very much for bringing it to us. We'll check in with you a little bit later. Now, as we focus on Kash Patel's confirmation process, I want to bring in CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane to talk a little bit more about this. So Scott, what are you hearing from your sources about these firings at the FBI?
Concern is that they're going to expand, Vlad. There's already been this list compiled of FBI agents and employees who were part of the January 6th investigation. That's about 5,000 people, any number of whom are concerned they're about to get fired simply for touching that case. But there's now an expanding concern. There's been already in the past 24 hours this move against other agency federal workers who are what they call probationary, new to the job, without the full protections of a longtime civil servant. There's a lot of FBI agents who fit that category, too. Potentially more than 1,000 FBI agents who the federal government considers probationary, new, without full protections. An association representing FBI employees issued a warning last night saying if you move against all of those workers, you could lose another 1,000 FBI agents, which would gut some of the critical task forces and missions inside the FBI. Could be child predator task forces, terrorism task forces, violent crime task forces, and a significant loss of institutional memory, and an awful lot of time would be needed, Vlad, to find, recruit, train, and background check replacement FBI agents.
So thus making Americans less safe. And as you know, Scott, oftentimes with these FBI agents and with the Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, we don't hear about the wins. We only hear about the failures, which are, thank God, few and far between. But this signals that we may see a bit more of those in the years ahead. Let me ask you about this bizarre press conference that the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, held yesterday. The Department of Justice, as you know, announced that it's suing New York State over its immigration policies. But the way that the Attorney General led that press conference by announcing that she had filed charges against individuals in New York State led a lot of people, including myself, not being a lawyer, to wonder if she was filing criminal charges against people like Letitia James. And instead, we find out that she's just suing them, and she actually hasn't filed anything. What more can you tell us?
It was an untraditional news conference. I was in the room at the Department of Justice. There was a gasp among those in the audience on press row when she initially indicated there'd be criminal charges against the governor and other key players in New York State. And she immediately clarified that this is a civil lawsuit, the likes of which there are thousands and tens of thousands across the country, including in New York each year. They also did not have a copy of the lawsuit to share during this press conference. That's untraditional, but it also sowed some confusion about what exactly is being alleged here and what type of damages is the U.S. Department of Justice seeking. Some of that's going to be clarified in a federal courthouse in Albany, the state capital where the state government is headquartered, as the Department of Justice tries to make an argument here that the state of New York is not cracking down hard enough on undocumented immigrants. If this lawsuit goes anywhere is a different story, but a political message has been sent. The first message by this Attorney General at that podium in this administration.
So just, Scott, so I understand, there's no paperwork yet. Nothing has actually been filed. This is an intention to sue, or they have already filed the paperwork that suggests that they are suing the governor and others, but they're not filing any criminal charges.
This is what's different, Vlad. This suit was not ready when it was announced. That's uncommon among federal prosecutors. It was made available late last night to some reporters, CBS News included. We expect it to hit the public docket today in Albany, but this will take weeks and months, maybe years, to litigate and adjudicate. There's no criminal component to this case. When the press conference began with an allusion to criminal charges, it was a misspeaking or a miscommunication by the Attorney General.
All right, Scott MacFarlane, always grateful for you, my friend, for providing that clarity that I, and I guess a lot of other people, sorely need. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right, police in Munich have arrested a suspect accused of driving into a union demonstration, injuring dozens of people. The suspected attack happened just hours before Vice President J.D. Vance arrived in Munich to discuss the war in Ukraine. So I want to bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Holly Williams to talk a little bit more about this. Holly, what do we know about this incident?
Good morning, Vlad. Well, German police say that at least 28 people were injured, including some children, some people seriously, after that man drove his car into a crowd at around 10:30 this morning local time at a square near downtown Munich. As you know, world leaders are gathering in Munich today ahead of a security conference tomorrow, including Vice President J.D. Vance and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. The police say that they fired a shot at the car and then detained the driver, who they say is believed to be a 24-year-old asylum seeker from Afghanistan. Now, the governor of that region, Bavaria, said that the incident is suspected to have been an attack. The crowd was gathered there for a protest organised by a union. Now, Germany goes to the polls for a national election in just over a week. Immigration is already a key issue, and this incident will likely play into that at that national election.
Wow. All right. We'll be tracking that throughout the next couple of days, Holly. Let's pivot to a discussion that we started yesterday about Ukraine. As you know, President Trump spoke with both Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky of Ukraine this morning. He posted that he feels that a deal can be reached to stop the war. As you can imagine, there is mixed reaction to this. First, I want to play, Holly, for you, sound from the former ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Listen to what he had to say.
I think there's a real possibility. All sides want it. The Russians are hurting. They need to stop this war. They've got incredible economic problems. The Ukrainians obviously want to stop this war, and Europeans do, and the United States does. So, yes, I think there's a real possibility this war could end this year.
All right, so folks want the war to end. That's clear. But Holly, this is a post from former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and it says in part, it is unconscionable to allow Russia to assault Ukraine's sovereignty, recruit enemies like North Korea to aid in their fight, and then sell out the Ukrainians by conceding the loss of their territory and NATO security guarantees or membership. By making these and other concessions before negotiations even started, Trump has effectively surrendered to Putin on Ukraine. I saw another post from Ambassador Bolton, Holly, where he said that the Kremlin is drinking vodka straight from the bottle after hearing from President Trump yesterday. What are you hearing from your sources on the ground about this?
Well, look, President Trump sounded very positive, didn't he, after that phone call with Putin? The Kremlin said that the phone call lasted nearly 1.5 hours. I think here's the problem for Ukrainians. What kind of ceasefire will Trump and Putin negotiate, and will it actually bring a lasting peace to Ukraine? I mean, yesterday, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said that while the US supports an independent Ukraine, it does not support NATO membership for Ukraine with all the security guarantees that that would bring. The US, he said, would not contribute soldiers to any international peacekeeping force in Ukraine. And he also said that returning Ukraine to its pre-2014 borders was, quote, unrealistic. So as a result, some Ukrainians fear that a ceasefire negotiated by President Trump could involve handing over part of their country, part of their territory to Russia without the security guarantees they want to stop Vladimir Putin reinvading, doing it all over again in a few years' time. If that happened, it would effectively be a huge victory for Vladimir Putin. It would reward him for invading Ukraine and igniting a war that has killed not killed, but caused hundreds of thousands of casualties on both sides. Vlad?
Before you go, and I know this is happening in real time because the news is still just breaking, but has there been any reaction from Brussels? I've seen some statements from European leaders that anything that happens with regards to ultimately a deal happening between Ukraine and Russia, the Europeans would have to be involved and be supportive of it. So what are you hearing on that front?
So look, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said yesterday that Europe needs to do more for European security. And we've heard the same thing from European defense ministers, that Europe should do more, that Europe should step up its efforts. But in a recent interview by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, he said that any security guarantees for Ukraine need to include the United States.
All right, Holly Williams with that deep analysis for us this morning. Holly, I appreciate you so much. Thank you. All right, folks, coming up, we're going to go to an Salvadorian prison and take you into one prison housing some of the most violent criminals.
Is it possible to get a tattoo like this if you're not a gang member?
No, you gotta kill.
You gotta kill to get those tattoos.
We're going to have that incredible reporting from our Lily Luciano just ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Dangerous winter weather is threatening both the West and East Coast. Right now, tens of thousands are without power and millions are under winter weather alerts. The eastern U.S. is preparing for more snow as like New Jersey, are still digging out from the last storm, and out west, California is bracing for possible mudslides from flash flooding. CBS News Colorado reporter Kennedy Cook is out in Denver and joins me now to talk more about it. So Kennedy, how cold is it supposed to get there, and how are residents preparing?
Hey, Vlad, good morning to you. As of right now, we're standing at a whopping 5 degrees. It is about 8 o'clock, mountain time here in Colorado. When we first got out here, it was about 1 degree, so we've gotten up in temperature. Today, we're expected to see middle 40 temperatures here, but it's extremely cold in Colorado. We're actually coming off a stretch of a historic shelter in place. Shelters all across the metro area and the high country have been open for people to come get warm. It was open for basically the entire month of January. We had a really nice first couple weeks here of February, but we are back to those cold temperatures.
And Kennedy, how are officials dealing with these back-to-back storms, and what are they telling residents?
Yeah, it's all about preparation here, prepping yourself, prepping your plants, your animals. What we have been telling everybody here on CBS Colorado is if you don't have to be out in the cold, maybe just don't go out in the cold. But again, those cold weather shelters have been open throughout Colorado. Lots of opportunities at local rec centers, libraries, and plenty of places for people to go and check out to make sure that they're staying nice and warm. And those operations have been reopened after that historic stretch I was just telling you about. So there's resources in the community, but I think the note here, as for myself, as I was just warming up here in my car, if you don't have to be outside, you probably don't need to be outside.
Good advice. Kennedy Cook, thank you very much. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, Vlad, look, this winter has been relentless. Let me zoom out here. Let me show you what's going on across the country. I'm going to put on the radar, and then I'm going to put on those current temperatures that we have across the United States, because if it's not a winter storm, it's that Arctic air that it's invading a good portion of the central United States. 7 degrees right now in Denver, but some places across the northern tier are dealing with temperatures 10 to 20 degrees below zero, and that's not even talking about the wind chill. We've got a departing storm system up to the northeast, and then you've got another atmospheric river event that is beginning to really inundate the west coast. Look at all the high elevation snow moving into the Sierra Nevada and portions into the higher elevations to the north. But then also, you've got a lot of rain that'll be moving over California over the next couple of days, especially in the Southern California. We're really going to have to keep a close eye on the threat for some land and some mudslides. All of these winter storm warnings, you've got winter weather advisories, even some ice storm concerns. As we make our way through the next 36 hours or so, multiple impacts with this here. Heavy rainfall, some places could get 3 to even up to nearly a foot of rainfall, 10 inches of snow, rain in some places, with 2 to 4 feet of snow in the higher elevations. I mentioned the flooding concerns in Southern California. That's going to be a legitimate thing to watch out for as we watch this heavy rainfall move into some of those burn scars from the fires, as we saw just last month. Severe weather across the south as we go into the weekend. We've got an elevated risk for severe weather. We'll talk more about this, Vlad, because it's not just winter weather, but it's severe weather in February, and that could mean some tornadoes. We'll talk more about that in just a bit. Back to you for now.
All right, can't wait. Talk to you a little bit later, Grant. Thank you very much. Just one day after we talked about consumer prices being higher, we learned wholesale prices also rose. So the producer price index, or PPI, jumped 0.4%. That is higher than expected, and could be another indicator that the progress against inflation has stalled. So I want to bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady, who joins me now in Studio 55 to talk more about this. So what caused PPI to tick up?
Yeah, so let's remember, this is producer prices. And so this is the cost that producers pay when they're producing the goods that then they sell to us. So the two biggest ones were what's called travel accommodation services. So basically that means the cost for your restaurants, your hotels. Think about the hospitality sector. That jumped 5.7% versus last month. So that's much higher than that overall 0.4% number. The other one, and this is such an important one, is diesel. That rose 10.2%. And I always call diesel the canary in the coal mine when it comes to inflation, because think about it, diesel impacts different products that are made. It's also what trucks run on that transport everything. I do want to note the market isn't really reacting like we saw it with CPI yesterday, and that's because some of the earlier costs in the pipeline, so airfare, some medical ones as well, it sort of showed that maybe we might see relief for producer prices in the next few reports.
So I don't want to ask you to predict, and we talked about how yesterday these are indicators from when Biden was still president of the United States, right? These are coming in from December and January, but I wonder what it's going to look like next month when we get these numbers.
Yeah, so that's kind of, they're reading the tea leaves, and they're saying it actually might come down a little bit. That being said, let's be honest, Vlad, yesterday we thought CPI, based on all the economists predicting, was going to come in lower than expected, and it actually increased. So sometimes the reading of the tea leaves is not great. I think what's really important about the PPI, though, is that when this rises, that is the warning sign that we're going to see consumer prices rise.
Because as it costs more for producers to produce, they pass those costs on to us.
Exactly.
And so that's why I was curious about what the CPI could look like, because my guess would be that prices would be higher.
Exactly. You will see that cost get pushed down to us when we go to the grocery store or wherever. And just a little plug from the Money Watch team, there is a tracker that you can use. It is cbsnews.com prices. So you can just sort of track those prices
You can track
online.
the prices of household goods and the things that are essential to consumers. All right, let's talk about the president on Truth Social this morning, talking about reciprocal tariffs, which are coming today. So which of the countries are going to be impacted by this?
Okay, so big ones are going to be India. It's going to be Vietnam, China, of course. I mean, we've already imposed tariffs on them under his administration and previous administrations. There's also this question of the VAT with Europe.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, it's a tax that exports when they're coming from, let's say, the U.S. When they go to Europe, it's a tax that's paid. It's not really a tariff, and so that's we're going to see whether that is something that the president.
He's applying VATs here?
No, so Europe applies a VAT.
Yeah, you usually go to the airport and then you
you fill out the form.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one. But for example, in Europe, cars specifically, there's a 10% tax on American cars going over to Europe. It's only about 2.5% coming into the country. So you could see that specifically go up to match that 10%.
Wow. All right. Yeah, this is going to be very interesting because on one hand, as you say, these tariffs long-term may be a good play for the United States, but short-term, there's going to be some pain. And actually, the president did say that in a tweet a few, whatever they're calling them now. What are the young people calling them? X's? Posts?
I don't know.
You go.
I'm still in the tweet age.
Yeah, me too. Kelly, always great to have you here. Thank you very much. All right. President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Education is facing lawmakers as the future of the department is actually in limbo. We're going to talk about it. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following. You're looking at the moment a U.S. Navy fighter jet crashed near downtown San Diego. The aircraft was flying in low visibility conditions near a crowded neighborhood before it came crashing down into the San Diego Bay. Both pilots safely ejected and parachuted into the water. They were rescued by some nearby fishermen. The U.S. Navy is investigating the cause of the crash. A gas explosion at a mall in Taiwan has killed at least 4 people and injured dozens. Officials say the blast came from the food court on the 12th floor. It sent debris and fragments raining down onto the streets below. The cause remains under investigation. And Elon Musk is now saying he will drop the $97 billion bid to take over OpenAI if it remains a nonprofit. Musk made the unsolicited offer earlier this week, leading a group of investors in purchasing the nonprofit assets that control the company. But in a new court filing, Musk claims he'll rescind the offer if OpenAI board is, quote, prepared to preserve the charity's mission. OpenAI's CEO Sam Altman immediately rejected Musk's offer, saying the company is not for sale. All right, President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Education is on Capitol Hill this morning for a confirmation hearing. But former WWE executive Linda McMahon's appearance comes at a time when the president has called for the elimination of the department. So let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James in a minute to talk about it. So, Willie James, the DOE has already come under attack for its support of several DEI initiatives. What else do we know about the president's criticism of the agency? And just for our viewers to understand, the president can say that he wants to get rid of the Department of Education, but only Congress can actually do away with it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Vlad. That's exactly right. Of course, the Department of Education was created during the Carter administration decades ago. And if the president wants to completely dismantle it, he will need Congress's buy-in. Now, there has been a bill introduced to do just that. But nonetheless, President Trump has said that he wants to essentially eliminate the Department of Education. Just yesterday, he said, "I'd like it to be closed immediately." I'm quoting him here. He also said the Department of Education is a, quote, is a big con job. Now, we do know that DOGE, led by Elon Musk, has gone after the department to cut about $1 billion in contracts, some of those contracts related to DEI, as you mentioned. And Trump, the president rather, has really just blasted not only the Department of Education, but other government agencies as well. But this is clearly a department that the president is keenly focused on. He mentioned as much during the campaign, and Linda McMahon would lead the department. But it's perhaps one of the jobs in Washington that you don't want, because it's one of the jobs that the president is seeking to eliminate. But still, nonetheless, the White House is seeking to confirm Linda McMahon as the Secretary of Education, and perhaps then will make those moves to come up with an executive order to dismantle it in some type of way. But as we both mentioned, he will need Congress's buy-in to completely eliminate the Department of Education, Vlad.
Willie, James, we're just showing some images coming into us of Linda McMahon there testifying before the Senate, and I'm told that the stern and angry man with the furrowed brow behind her is a WWE wrestler, Triple H. So I expect to see some body slams if she doesn't get confirmed. You can see her just tossing Chuck Grassley around the place like a rag doll, because he's like 90. So let me ask you about this, Judge Willie James. Yesterday, that rule that the president's buyout offers for federal employees can now proceed. What do we know about that?
Yeah, a federal judge essentially is allowing this to proceed, saying the unions that represented government workers didn't have the proper standing to sue in this case and to stop the buyout offer that the Trump administration has offered to millions of federal workers. Now, we do know, we had an updated number. We got that number from the White House this morning. Some 75,000 workers have taken the federal government up on this buyout or deferred retirement, or however you want to put it, this buyout offer, and that will last until September. Now, these government employees, they won't have to work, but it's also important to point out that funding for the government expires mid-next month. So the funding hasn't necessarily been appropriated to go towards the end of the fiscal year, which is when these terminations, these deferred terminations, were set to take place. But still, nonetheless, the Trump administration is full steam ahead with reducing the size of the federal government, not only with those efforts focused partly on reducing spending with the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, but also to cut the federal workforce. And in fact, some workers at the Department of Education, a source familiar, have received those letters informing them that their positions have been eliminated. This is, of course, on top of those buyout offers that were offered to federal employees, Vlad.
All right, Willie James Inman for us. Thank you, Willie James. Let's turn now to the situation in the Middle East this morning. Hamas says it will release the next group of Israeli hostages as planned this weekend. The militant group previously had threatened to delay the release, accusing Israel of violating the ceasefire deal and threatening to bring the agreement crashing down. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay is following the very latest for us from Tel Aviv. So Chris, fast-moving developments out of the region this morning. The question, of course, is will Hamas react to President Trump's statement that they need to release all of the hostages this weekend? Apparently, that's not happening.
You know, it's a very good question, and one that I don't think anyone really knows the answer to. But for now, they've said that they're going to at least release the 3 hostages that had been agreed to previously in this ceasefire. And if you'll remember, that ceasefire was pushed through by Donald Trump even before he had become president, even before he'd returned to the Oval Office. He tweeted out or posted on X that there would be hell to pay, or all hell would break loose, something along those lines, if the hostages weren't released by the time he came to office. And so this stalemate of a situation, this deal that had been stuck since May, all of a sudden we started to see movement on it. That is, until earlier this week, when Hamas said no because Israel allegedly had breached some of the terms of that agreement. Hamas said that Israel wasn't giving enough aid to Gaza and also wasn't allowing enough Gazans to return to their homes. So they said that effectively their terms, the release of hostages, was going to end this coming weekend. Trump again threatened that all hell would break loose if the hostages weren't released. So we're starting to see a pattern here. We're also starting to see Israel take a cue. We saw first Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu repeat that exact same language. Then his defense minister repeated the same language. He's actually right now convening a meeting with the Southern Command. That's the military of Israel that's around and inside of Gaza as we speak. So we still don't have clarity from Israel exactly what they're going to do. But for the time being, at least, Hamas says it's going to live up to its side of the bargain. Also, Israel, according to our CBS Gaza team on the ground, they say that Israel has already brought in 150 trucks overnight, and those trucks were packed with aid, and they committed to bring in mobile housing units. So the signs seem to indicate that the deal is going to hold, but we won't know until Saturday when Hamas is supposed to release the next 3 hostages.
And Chris, before I let you go, it's been a couple of days since President Trump talked about turning the Gaza Strip into nice beachfront property, and even saying Palestinians would not have the right to be there. We're talking about 2 million people that would have to be displaced if the president were to actually move forward with his plans. Any reaction? He talks about all hell breaking loose. When you look at the scenes across Gaza, it seems as if hell has already broken loose, and yet we show images of Hamas fighters. Those images could have come from a year ago or 5 years ago. They're still there.
They are indeed still there, and that is a sticking point for Israel, for instance. There's no way that Israel is going to end this war, they say, so long as Hamas is still in charge. The reaction on the ground is that by and large, most Palestinians who we've spoken to vis-a-vis our Gaza team that's on the ground there, most people do not want to go nowhere. They want to stay in Gaza. They've told us that they're going to pitch tents, do whatever they can to stick around. But we don't get the impression from neither Israel or from the Trump administration that their opinion is being listened to.
All right, Chris Lipsey for us live in Tel Aviv this evening for us. Thank you, Chris. All right, back to weather now. We have storms hitting both sides of the country. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, Vlad, look, it's crazy how active this pattern has been across the entire country. We just talked a moment ago about the active weather. One storm system exits to the east. Another storm system is rolling in from the west. And then right in the middle of the United States, you've got some of the coldest air that we've seen this winter. Maybe not so much for the northern tier states, but still, you've got 10 to 20 degrees below zero actual temperatures. Even into portions of Colorado, you're talking about single-digit temperatures right now. Denver at 7 degrees. It's very cold, but the storm system just continued to move in. Let me pull up the northern hemisphere so you can really get a good look at this next atmospheric river that's moving into the west coast here. You've got all the specific moisture that's being concentrated with that low pressure system that's moving ashore and will continue to move across not just the west, but it'll move across the entire country as we head through the weekend. So a lot to track here as we make our way through the second half of the week into the weekend, where, again, it's not just winter weather, but it's also severe weather. We'll start with the atmospheric river inundating the west coast. You've got 2 to 4 feet of snow in the higher elevations. Some places could see between 3 to 10 inches of rain. So flooding, obviously a concern, especially down towards the LA fire burn scars. And then you have severe weather on tap as we go into the weekend. This is the Storm Prediction Center's convective outlook for severe weather going into Saturday. An enhanced risk for severe weather, damaging winds, tornado, all in the card from Louisiana, Mississippi, into Alabama. Watch this here as we put the forecast into motion as we make our way through Saturday into Sunday. You've got severe weather to the south. You've got winter weather to the north. That moves to the east as we go into Sunday. And then here we go. Another system moves into the west coast. This pattern looks to continue, Vlad, as we head into the second half of February. Back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you. Coming up, a rare look inside one of El Salvador's most secure prisons, home to some of the country's most dangerous killers, as the U.S. considers sending deportees to El Salvador. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, we're watching these three hearings on Capitol Hill. The full Senate is voting on RFK Jr.'s nomination to run HHS. Linda McMahon has her hearing for Education Secretary, and we are waiting to see if Kash Patel's nomination for FBI Director will be advanced. We're going to obviously have a lot more on these hearings throughout the course of the day, so stick around for that. Meanwhile, last week, El Salvador's president told Secretary of State Marco Rubio his country would incarcerate deportees from the United States. Well, this morning, we are getting a rare look at the country's prison system. CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano traveled to El Salvador and got extraordinary access to a prison housing some of the country's most dangerous criminals.
Is it possible to get a tattoo like this if you're not a gang member?
No, you gotta kill.
You gotta kill to get those tattoos. How do you feel right now?
Gotta recognize that what happened to us is like that Titanic, that we were big and strong gang, but we got hit with the iceberg.
Are you gonna be here the rest of your life?
Yeah, the rest of my life. We murdered a lot of people, and this is the consequence of what we did one day.
How do you stay sane? How do you keep your head above water?
Like, try to act strong in the day and cry in the nighttime.
You cry at night?
Yeah, because we know that we're not gonna get out of here. It's a maximum security prison.
What was the gang that you were a part of?
MS-13.
And Lilia Luciano joins us now. So Lilia, this is incredible access that you received to this prison. First of all, let's talk about why you wanted to do the story.
Oh, Vlad, this story goes back so many years. For years, I covered, as you know, the border, even before joining CBS News. And I remember so many stories of people who had suffered the most brutal extortion, kidnapping, torture by these gangs. And suddenly, I stopped meeting Salvadorians at the border. I mean, the numbers dropped significantly. So I started looking into what was happening beyond the border. Of course, learned a lot about the crackdown on these gangs by Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador. And so for over a year and a half, I've been asking for access, both to interview the president, which I haven't been able to do, but also to this prison because it is notorious. It is also kind of, you know, the way I see it, it was very difficult to be there. It's going to take me a while to process what I saw. But there's something that's very interesting, and it's like almost like the branding, not of the people, but of the whole system. Nayib Bukele now is telling the U.S., offered Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, the possibility of deporting and outsourcing our detention system for criminal immigrants and people who have a criminal record, but also even to U.S. citizens in our prison system. So he's been very adamant to show this system to the world, and being in there, you kind of get a really interesting look at the message that is being sent. We were able to crack down on these gangs. We were able to solve the issue of organized crime that is usually controlled from prisons all throughout the region and throughout the world. But at what cost? And that's something else that I'm looking into in this story that we're presenting tomorrow on the evening news.
So the idea would be that migrants and undocumented immigrants here in the United States who have broken laws, who are criminals, right? We're talking about hardcore criminals. We're not talking about a mom and a child. That's the question that I have.
That's the question. Bukele said people with convictions, including U.S. citizens. Of course, there are legal issues with that. There are constitutional issues. Both Marco Rubio and President Trump have noted that. But, you know, when we look at what does it mean to break the law, this prison, yes, it is filled with the most dangerous gang members. Many of them, most of them, according to some experts, although the data is not transparent, is not available, were in prison even before Bukele's crackdown, before his state of exception. We also looked into the state of exception. I did a patrol with their Secretary of Defense, who is armed, walking around the streets, and people come up and hug him and say, hey, thank you for what you've done. But at the same time, you ask, wait, so who has been detained under this state of exception? And human rights organizations that used to help the people who were victimized by the gangs are now helping people who they say are being persecuted by the state. They tell you that the 84,000 people who have been detained under this state of exception that gives a lot of power to police and a few rights to people are mostly not the people that we see in Secot, but everyday people with very little evidence of any gang connection.
Wow, powerful reporting, Lilia. You always do incredible reporting, but I think that this piece will have an impact on people's understanding of what President Trump is seeking to do and what some other world leaders, presidents of other countries have done, and what that means just constitutionally speaking for their own citizens.
Those
Really
collaborations between us and the region, also Bukele is trying to bring more investment into his country, which is a whole other conversation.
Can't wait to see it. Thank you, Lilia, as always.
Vlad.
Folks, we're going to see much more of her reporting tomorrow night on the CBS Evening News, so stick around for that. Meanwhile, for us, much more news ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Taking you back now to Capitol Hill, where the Senate is voting on the confirmation of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for Health and Human Services Secretary. It is one of 3 confirmation hearings that are happening on the Hill right now, and we're watching all 3 of them right here on CBS News 24/7. So let's bring back CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. So what are you hearing, Caitlin?
Hey, Vlad. Well, right now the Senate is voting on the confirmation, the full confirmation of RFK Jr. to lead Health and Human Services. He is expected to be confirmed. We have seen some of the holdouts, like Lisa Murkowski, that moderate Republican senator who we are always wondering which way she's going to go. She has said that she will vote for his confirmation. So we're watching that closely on the Senate floor to see if there are any Republicans that we don't know about who are going to vote against him. But at this point, he appears to be headed to full confirmation. Vlad, this is very significant because this was one of Trump's most controversial choices for his cabinet. You had several lawmakers, including Republicans, who had raised concerns about his positions, past statements, questioning the efficacy of vaccines. Lisa Murkowski, Senator Cassidy, who we've talked about before, who had raised concerns about this, say that they have assurances from Kennedy that he is not going to discourage vaccination efforts. So they have kind of laid down the marker, Vlad, to say, look, this is what he has promised us, and we are telling you, the American people, that we are going to keep on him to make sure that happens. We'll see what happens there. You also have a lot of other activity here on Capitol Hill when it comes to Trump's picks for his cabinet. Kash Patel, his choice to lead the FBI, is expected to come out of the committee vote. That means the committee of jurisdiction over him is expected shortly to vote him, and you see that on your screen there, vote him out of committee and on to full Senate confirmation there. Another one of the controversial picks, but so far we haven't seen any Republican voice opposition to him, so that's significant. You also have here on Capitol Hill Linda McMahon, Trump's choice to lead the Department of Education. She's just starting her confirmation hearing process, so it'll be a while before we see an actual confirmation for her. But this is significant because Elon Musk has already talked about slashing funds for the Education Department, and Trump has said on the campaign trail he wants to get rid of it altogether. So we'll see what happens there.
All right, Caitlin, breaking it all down for us on the Hill. Thank you as always, friend. Let's check in on those 2 powerful storm systems that are threatening both the East and West Coast. CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore is back with the final look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, Vlad, I'll tell you what, the active weather pattern is going to continue. Like you said, 2 storm systems, one exiting the East Coast, bringing a lot of rain to the south, snow to the north. You've got bitterly cold air across the central part of the United States with another atmospheric river and associated low pressure system just pummeling the West Coast, bringing a lot of snow to the mountains, 2 to 4 feet in some places and upwards of 10 inches of rain. That storm system moves to the east as we go into tomorrow, but that contrast between warm air to the south, cold air to the north is going to fuel severe weather outbreak across the deep south as we go into the weekend. Back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. Folks, that does it for me. It's been fun, but stay right where you are. After the break, Elizabeth Cook is live from San Francisco